Okay, so first lecture of a few lectures surrounding the gastrointestinal system. So quite a bit to go here. So remember I talked about that one slide, that one very important slide. It looks like this. Hopefully you remember this one. So this is the one I want to explain to you guys today. Okay, so first let's just set up the system so you guys know where we are at. So let's it won't be chat this time, maybe some kind of a Naidu or something. Okay, so here's the guy. I'm just gonna make him a blob now. Cut off his arms and legs. It's gonna look something like this. So mouth connected to the esophagus connected to the stomach. Or doesn't okay, but stomach. Alright. And then the stomach feeds into the duodenum, yeah, so duodenum, ileum, jejunum, all of those. Remember the thing convolves a million times inside here. Okay. I'm not saying this is the structure, but I want to let you understand where we are at. Okay, so firstly, things of importance here. Gastroesophageal sphincter, this one here. So this one stops all of the fluid inside here from going that way. Alright, and then we've got the pyloric pump here, well, the pylorus sphincter, which moves all of the fluid from here through here. And this one basically runs on communication between these two. But that's going to confuse you guys a lot more than I want to. Okay, most important thing here is the stomach. So inside the stomach, we've got some lining here. So let's say that we're talking about different cells here, and then we're talking about a mucosa, and that's good enough for now. So where I want to concentrate now is basically on the inside of the stomach, on the lining and the acid. Okay, so I'm taking this now and I'm flipping it around and I'm zooming it in. So maybe I should have just drawn it the other way. Okay, but we're zooming in anyways. Voila. Okay, so this is the stomach lining. This is the inside of the stomach, and this is everything else. So this is the blood supply towards the stomach, for example, and things are delivered. And then we have what's called the parietal cell. We've got the superficial epithelial cell, and a few other things. Okay, but I want us to concentrate here today. This is the most important thing. And yes, okay, can you remember what receptors we have here? So we have something like a muscarine receptor here. I think it's drawn like this on the slide. I'll draw it hopefully similarly to what it's drawn like on the slides, hopefully close enough. So we've got a muscarine 3 receptor here. We've got a CCK2 receptor here. Is it 2? Just double check my facts before I tell you it's 2. It looks like a 2. That is a 2. And then we've got a histamine 2 receptor here, and we've got a EP3 receptor here. Alright, and then on the superficial epithelial cell we've got another EP3 receptor, and we have another muscarinic receptor. I think it's a muscarinic, no, it's a muscarinic question mark receptor. So let's just ignore it. If we don't know which one it is, we don't know how to counteract anything with it, so just ignore it. Okay, so under normal circumstances, we've got something called the enterochromaffin cells, or we just call them the ECL cells for short. They have a lot of functions and they secrete a lot of things. One of being histamine, one of being serotonin. Okay, but serotonin I'm just mentioning for interest sake. Don't worry about it for now, but just for interest sake, I'm putting it in there. EC, etc. And it's stimulated by gastrin, and gastrin is released by various other cells in the stomach. Alright, so if this is stimulated, it will make histamine, and just forget about that, it will make us more confused, and that'll go there. And then we have the nervous system. Of course, you have the blood supply here, and we have a nervous system, but I'm taking now a nervous system which would have looked something like this, and I'm zooming it into a single cell. So I'm taking a single cell and zooming it in. So this is a zoomed in cell. So the ENS, enteric nervous system, and here we have a bunch of what do we call it? The vagal nervous system surrounding the gut. So we have acetylcholine being released from here, ACH, and acetylcholine stimulated. Remember, it's a chain, so this chain is stimulated by different cells releasing acetylcholine stimulating the next cell. Okay, so once again, something like this. Remember, when you smell food, when you want to eat food, this process will be activated. So when you smell food, your stomach will start with a vagal stimulation. Remember, you're resting and digesting. When you're eating food, you're resting and digesting. Stomach motility is increased. So one of the functions of the enteric nervous system, or one of the functions of the vagal nervous system, is to stimulate this process, whereby which acetylcholine will stimulate the ECL cell and create histamine. And histamine will go and stimulate the histamine 2 receptor. Okay, but I want you to understand that this is a normal physiological function. These are things that should happen in a normal person. So, but what if this guy here, this Mr. Naidu, has too much stomach acid being released, and the stomach acid is now pressing against the gastroesophageal sphincter and causing some irritation here. Remember, this part here doesn't have any mucosal lining. Remember, on this side of the stomach, we have this mucosal lining being made here. And this mucosal lining is protecting us against the stomach acid, which has a pH of, let's say, 0.9, or I think it's 0.9 to 2. So if you have a 0.9 to 2, it's very low. It can dissolve a coin. Your stomach acid is extremely potent. It can dissolve a coin. But because we have this amazing mechanism of making this mucosa, or this mucosa, we actually protect our cells against it. So, but our esophagus doesn't actually have this. So if our gastroesophageal sphincter malfunctions for some reason, or has too much pressure playing against it, or you're very fat and your stomach is being pushed down by your big gut, then this will have more pressure against it, and the stomach acid will leak through into this area and cause irritation there. And that irritation will feel like heartburn. Okay, so that's the very mild version of it. Of course, there are much more serious versions of increased stomach acid, or maybe let's call it just the peptic ulcers. Okay, now this slide. First of all, I want you to understand that if a pH is 0.9 and 2, it's normal, that's fine. But if you are very fat, or if you're eating things that are destroying your mucosa, or if you are doing things that create an even lower pH, you will run into problems, and then we want to counteract that. And don't ask me why, I still don't know why. We need to ask a dietitian, or I need to ask a dietitian, why a lower pH doesn't mean we'll have undigested food. Of course, we don't get undigested food when we use lansoprazole and the PPIs, but for some reason, we just get better, no symptoms. One of the things that's bothering me in life is not knowing that. Okay, so our goal here is to lower the pH, or to increase the pH to an area where it doesn't actually burn our esophagus anymore, or burn the stomach lining anymore. Remember, if the stomach lining for some reason is removed, what will happen to us? The stomach acid will burn the cells here, or let's just call it the tissue, stomach tissue on the inside. So a tissue is more a collection of cells. Okay, so there are circumstances where we don't want that low pH. So how do we lower the pH? And this is now where we are at. And this goes with that slide. Please remember that slide. So within our bodies, let's create our proton pump here first. So this proton pump, I'm just going to call it H2. What H2? No, why am I calling it H? What do we call it? H for hydrogen. The hydrogen pump, the proton pump. Remember, the more hydrogen is in here, the more acidic the stomach becomes. The less hydrogen is pumped this way, the less acidic the stomach becomes. So that's very important. Remember, pH, the power of H. Okay, so let's revert back to basics quickly here. So if we have muscarinic stimulation at this area, then we get an activatory mechanism which will cause calcium to increase, which will lead to the hydrogen pump being activated. If we stimulate CCK2, calcium influx will happen once again, and we'll go to a positive, and we'll go to more hydrogen being pumped into the stomach. Now this is the most important one. If we have gastrin being released upon smelling food, and gastrin stimulates the Chromaffin, I can't remember how to say that word, cells, that will release histamine, and histamine will stimulate histamine 2 receptors, and histamine 2 receptors will increase the cyclic AMP within the parietal cell, and this cyclic AMP will then stimulate the proton pump to make more, or to pump more acid into the stomach. Okay, this is the most important one. And then we have the EP3 receptor, which prostaglandins bind to, and those prostaglandins come from COX-1 reactions. And remember, all of those COX-1 reactions are beneficial, and they happen all of the time. The COX-2 reactions are the ones that give us the inflammatory prostaglandins. So if you stimulate the EP3 receptor on the parietal cell, you get a decrease in cyclic AMP. So if you have a decrease in cyclic AMP, you make less hydrogen pump into the stomach. Okay, that's the most important parts I want you guys to focus on quickly. Okay, so in theory, if we give a person botanical or carbachol, a cholinergic agonist, we will increase the stomach decrease the stomach acid. If we give a person a histamine 2 antagonist like nizatidine and ranitidine and cimetidine, we will increase or decrease cyclic AMP. Normal activation, so a normal agonist gives you increase. So if you give an antagonist, we will decrease cyclic AMP, decrease stimulation, and then we get less acid pumped into the stomach. So what is important is that 85% of our stomach acid is being made on this basis here. 85%, so most of it is being made by this basis here. So even if you could block the muscarinic receptors, which is kind of pointless because these receptors are so far spread in the body, you will have a lot of different side effects. Even if you could block it, you would only get to 15% effectiveness because this process here will still be running. It might be that you get a bit more because you have less histamine release here, but well, maybe, I'm not sure, but you will have so many more side effects in different areas of the body. It doesn't make sense. That's why there's no therapy really for it at the moment. Cholecystokinases 2, I don't think we have anything that acts on it. I think we do have a few things on the market, but it really comes in with diabetes more. Remember we spoke about GIP, gastrointestinal peptide, and we spoke about CCK and secretin. There were a few things we spoke about earlier in class. I wanted to make you guys aware of these ones because they really come into play with all of the new medications against diabetes. But in terms of PUD, they don't really play as big a role medicine-wise. And then the EP3 receptor. So if you have a prostaglandin like, I don't know, let's say PGD2, and that stimulates the EP3 receptor, it will cause a decrease in cyclic AMP. Less cyclic AMP, less stimulation of the proton pump, and then less acid being pumped out. Okay, so a lot of mechanisms happening here at the same time. How and where do we start? Okay, we already started. So if we gave nizatidine, ranitidine, or cimetidine, we could have inhibited the biggest pathway here. And then of course there's another drug. So the drugs we use the most are the ones we call the PPIs, proton pump inhibitors. So those are lansoprazole, pantoprazole, omeprazole. There's a lot of them. So effectively they form covalent bonds with the proton pump. Covalent bonds can't be undone. Eh? As soon as you have a covalent bond, it's a done deal. The pump is deactivated completely. So even if you take lansoprazole now, which has a half-life about 3 hours, it has permanently deactivated a proton pump on its own, or the single molecule. So now the body will have to go back to the DNA within each cell. Remember, DNA is in all cells. Even if all of these other things are happening, confusing you completely, the normal functioning of a cell is still all there. And then remember the central dogma we spoke about in HIV. At the end of the day, we've got mRNA, we've got translation, transcription, and translation, transcription, and then you end up with things like structural proteins and functional proteins. So a structural protein in this case would be something like the proton pump itself. So this cell here, as soon as this proton pump has been deactivated, it'll have to go back. Well, its DNA will have to synthesize a new pump before it can actually continue pumping out hydrogen. But remember, there are millions and millions of cells. So it's not like you take one capsule of lansoprazole and you finished. You've inhibited all of the pumps. It's not that simple. I think they call it almost like a steady state suppression. I think you only achieve it 5 to 7 days into therapy with the PPIs. It doesn't happen immediately. But if you take a PPI now and you don't actually have any reflux issues, that's maybe just a once-off thing because you went to Shell and you ate one of their garage pies, then you would have suppression of the gastric acid for a few days afterwards. So it has a short half-life, but it's long-acting. I hope that makes sense. So most of the drugs filter into this stage. Very important to know. Then another thing I really wanted to mention to you guys, which I hope you understand, is about the secondary messenger, cyclic AMP. Maybe we'll go into it at the end. Maybe first things first, there's another easier thing to do, to mention first to you. So let's talk about EP3 receptors causing more mucus production. And why am I spelling, is it right? Yeah, it's right. So mucus production and then mucus being made on the outside. So positive and then more mucus being made. So this is dependent on prostaglandins as well, like the PGD2. But now, let's say you were taking hydrocortisone, or you were taking beclometasone, or dexamethasone, or aspirin, or ibuprofen, or naproxen, or indomethacin. There's a lot of things. Anything that can inhibit COX-1 reactions, you will inhibit the prostaglandins from being made. If we don't make prostaglandins, there will be nothing to stimulate the EP3 receptor and you won't get mucus production. If you don't get mucus production, all of the stomach acid on the inside of your stomach will simply eat away at the tissue, so the collection of cells. And what will that lead to? A peptic ulcer. Or it can lead to a perforation. And if you have a perforation, is it severe? Of course it's severe. You don't want your stomach acid to spread around in the sterile parts of your abdomen. It'll lead to a severe infection, sepsis and septic shock, and maybe even death. So a lot of people do die from perforations. A lot of people get a perforation and they're not aware of it. They've got they've got a high pain tolerance and they have no idea they have a problem, and then all of a sudden they end up in the ICU with a perforation and sepsis. So it really is important to capture peptic ulcers soon so it doesn't progress. And we'll go into Helicobacter pylori just now, but first things first, this. Okay. So we do have a few drugs that can stimulate this process, the most important one being misoprostol. Misoprostol is, simply put, a prostaglandin analog, and it will bind to the EP3 receptor and cause mucus production go up. And then another thing I didn't mention is also that we have more, what was it again? Bicarbonate being released. So as soon as prostaglandins bind to the EP3 receptor, we have more mucus production and we have increased bicarbonate release on this side. What does bicarbonate do this side, you ask? What do you think it does? Remember, it looks like this. So if you have, okay, now I know you guys are chemistry buffs. I'm not such a chemistry buff anymore. So if you put these two together, what do you get? Does it look right? I hope it looks right, but it should look like something like this. So as soon as hydrogen is now part of another chemical structure, it doesn't have that caustic effect that it has on its own. So it becomes, well, the one is an acid, the one is a base. So this is a base. So it just increases the pH as soon as this happens. So this won't happen in the case where you don't have prostaglandins running around. So if you're using an NSAID. So this is the mechanism by which aspirin and ibuprofen etc. causes stomach ulcers. It's not that aspirin is so acidic it causes irritation of gastrointestinal lining. No, well, I don't think so. But 90% of the medications we're using or more doesn't come anywhere close to this pH. So it's not like they come in and they burn our stomachs. Our stomach is already burning. Well, that's a burning area. So it might cause gastrointestinal irritation, a different area and on a different mechanism, but it's not that it's an acid that irritates the stomach. You already have a very acidic stomach. Okay, that's very important to mention. So I think I've explained a little bit about this. I'm not sure if it's enough for you guys, but maybe there's one more thing I can explain for you. So outside of everything we just spoken about, I want you to quickly remember this here. Histamine 2, cyclic AMP, proton pump being activated. So I really do think you guys need some knowledge about secondary messengers. So I want to tell you about secondary messengers. So remember that we have histamine 2 receptor. Histamine 2 is stimulated by histamine. Okay, so that stimulation there leads to cyclic AMP being increased. And that's because H2 is a transmembrane receptor, a serpentine receptor that binds to adenyl cyclase, and it's a GS protein. Okay, I'm just trying to make sense. I haven't done this in quite a while. Adenyl cyclase will then take ADP. No. Oh, it takes ATP and it makes it ADP. And by doing this, it actually uses energy to create cyclic AMP from something else, but I can't remember. And then cyclic AMP actually does the function of stimulating the proton pump this side. Okay, so just to make a little bit sense of it, I don't think this is 100% the right process. I can't remember 100% the right process, but it's to give you an idea of secondary messengers. So histamine comes, histamine stimulates histamine 2 receptors. Histamine 2 receptors are what we call serpentine receptors. So these are transmembrane receptors that go through the membrane like this. So what they do is they basically communicate the outside world of the cell with the inside world of the cell. So as soon as histamine 2 receptors are stimulated, they can stimulate adenyl cyclase within a cell. And adenyl cyclase is responsible for creating cyclic AMP from ATP. And then cyclic AMP actually stimulates the proton pump itself. And then we get the hydrogen being pushed out. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So what can influence this cyclic AMP to make it more? So in a case like, normally we have